7 people watching us.
Hey guys, how you doing? Hey Dad.
Hey Dad, that's right, our dad and mom.
Yeah.
I'm here with Perry Noble. We are at the Whiteboard Sessions. This is the conference channel. We're doing some interviews with the speakers. Perry has not yet spoken. You're speaking this afternoon. But one of those guys you're actually tracking with all the other speakers. I'm doing that too because I'm last. And the worst thing I want is for you to speak on the same thing I'm speaking on. So we're rather than me saying, what did you just speak on, I'm going to say, what are you going to tell them? What's the big idea that you're bringing to Whiteboard Sessions today?
I think the big idea is I'm just going to communicate, be who God called you to be and do what God called you to do and quit focusing on what everybody else is doing.
That's kind of a short message. Is there a longer version? You give us a little more detail?
You know, I think the thing that happens when you go to conferences is I call it imitation rather than revelation. Okay. People go and they see a model of ministry that is good and it is effective. But the reason it's effective in that church is because it's what God told that church to do particularly. And they come back and they announce to their church, we're changing everything, and they screw the whole thing up. And I think the thing that bothers me about a lot of Christian movements is if God is doing a work in a church, that people from another church will pack people on a bus and consistently travel to that church to participate in that work of God, rather than being at their church going, God, if you did it there, you can do it here. But what specifically do you want to do here? Because what God's doing there he might need to do something different at church B rather than, and so I think really challenging pastors to get a vision for what God's called their church to do.
It seems that we seem to package and commodify the work of God, and it doesn't work the same way. God seems to have a unique DNA and vision for each church.
Exactly.
Tell us a little about the unique DNA and vision of New Spring and what God's doing there. Of course, I've had the privilege of kind of tracking from a distance for a little while. We had some mutual friends at the beginning. How old's the church? What's going on? Now you've gone multi-site. Walk the folks just a little bit of the journey of how you got to where you are today.
Well, we started in 1999 in a living room with 8 people. I didn't even know what a mega church was. Mm-hmm. I honestly didn't know. If you'd have said mega church, are you one of those? I'd have been like, no, we don't ever want to be, because it sounded like something you get at McDonald's. And so I didn't know what a mega church was. All I knew was there's a lot of people going to hell, and they won't come to church, but they're not bad people. Yeah. Everybody automatically assumed that you're a bad person if you don't go to church. And I'm like, I play basketball with these guys. They're great people. And most of them cussed less than the people on the church league teams. So, I mean, I knew that they were great guys and we should hang out, but I couldn't get them to come to church. And so I was like, well, let's just start a church for people who don't feel comfortable going to church. And what we found is we grew, and we didn't have a program. We didn't have a strategic plan to grow. I didn't know about the formulas and the things. I just knew, man, we're going to do what we do. We're going to do it well. We're going to keep it simple. And God literally grew us from 8 people in a living room to now we're running right under 8,000 people in Anderson, South Carolina.
Which is the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere.
Like, I know you love it there, but
I love Anderson.
You have to kind of get off the interstate and go. I have family there, so I go there a lot. Now you started at Anderson, I guess it was college, now it's university.
Yeah, now it's university.
And now you've gone from that one location, you've got a facility, now you're starting these other places in Greenville, Florence. Tell them about how that's kind of developed.
Well, we want to do multi-site. I don't think multi-site is a fad. I think it's here to stay. And so I'm pumped about it. Mm-hmm. And we're getting ready to go to Greenville, South Carolina, which Greenville County is 2.5 times the size of Anderson County. We're getting ready to go to Florence, which is roughly about the size of Anderson County. Mm-hmm. I feel like we know how to do ministry in that context, and so that'll be fun. And we literally want to reach the state of South Carolina.
Yeah, I read it's kind of a South Carolina vision. You've got different places, different cities. Why? Is North Carolina, is there a law there you're not allowed to go? What's the deal with South Carolina?
If anybody needs Jesus, it's definitely the people in North Carolina. But I feel like I'm Tar Heel fans and stuff like that. But
they do need it.
Originally, I think that's the first step. That's what God is. I think God reveals vision in steps, and I know He wants us to be focused on some major places in South Carolina. But eventually, I think it'll be the Southeast.
Now, why South Carolina may be, depending on how you look at the numbers, may be the most religiously oriented state in the country. But you and I both know it's often what the Bible calls a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof.
Absolutely.
So how do you do ministry? We hear some guy in Seattle or New York or Chicago. What's different being in what may be the buckle of the Bible Belt and doing ministry the way you do ministry?
Ed, every church planter that goes out and plants a church in a location says that his location is the toughest place to plant a church in America.
That's true.
I've heard them all say it. Rick says it about Saddleback. Driscoll says it about Mars Hill. I think where we are is the toughest place to plant a church because when you read Scripture, Jerusalem was the toughest place to plant a church. I mean, it was hard to do ministry in Jerusalem. I mean, that's what you kept getting killed, but because they were so used to it.
Right.
And I think in the Southeast, especially South Carolina, people are so used to it. But here's what blows my mind, Ed, and I'm talking about this a little bit today. People will say, well, just forget about church people. Here's the problem. We've got church people that are coming to our church, and they're receiving Christ because they've never heard the gospel. They've never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so they'll come in and go, now, that thing you talked about today, I've been in church for 40 years. I've never heard that. Is that true?
Wow.
You know, they were just told at 6 years old to get baptized.
Yeah.
And I have a heart for these people. And so I believe religious people, when converted, some of your best Christians. The Apostle Paul is the best example of that. And so I've just got a heart, and I think God has given me a unique voice to reach people who have been in church for a long time but never received Christ.
So it's not even unchurched, not even de-churched. It's just lost people at church.
Lost people at church. I think lost people in churches is the biggest target market in America that nobody's talking about.
Okay. Interesting. And that's kind of the area where you feel God's called you to your church
Well,
to step in.
I think we're doing that, but also I think we're seeing I've got a friend coming right now. In fact, I led this guy to Christ a few weeks ago. He's as unchurched as they come. Mm-hmm. And he loves our church.
So it's
because
both and rather than either or.
It's not an either or, it's both and.
Okay.
We've got a lot of lost and unchurched people coming to our church, and we welcome them with open arms. But I'm not the guy that stands out there going, if you're church, you need to... Now, the churched people that are entrenched in church culture, they eventually leave our church because we don't have a women's ministry, we don't have a men's ministry, we don't have this ministry and this ministry for single guys who have no job, and we just don't have all those ministries going, and so those people will eventually leave our church. What we're trying to do at New Spring is just teach people how to passionately fall in love with Jesus.
And the way you look at churches, you talk about reaching the unchurched. It sounds very similar to the language we heard in the 80s and the 90s, contemporary church, et cetera. The difference seems to be, you seem to, as you said, the gospel being so clear and so wanting to be articulated. You kind of bring it pretty hard. You preached on hell recently, and not just one, but several times on hell.
Right.
Why is this seems different than the way we would hear this communicated 15 years ago in the contemporary church movement? What's going on there that's different?
I am a old-fashioned preacher at my heart.
Okay.
I love God's word, and I just think the problem with too many I think the problem with a lot of churches is the pastors. Pastors probably shop at Victoria's Secrets, and that's what they're wearing under their clothes. Is the nice way to put it.
Wow. I don't really know how to respond to that.
They don't have the guts,
strength of character,
the guts to say what needs to be said. I'm being
Backbone.
nice.
And I
Backbone.
appreciate that, yes.
I think hell is real.
Yeah.
I think hell is hot. Mm-hmm. I think people really do go there without Jesus, and it needs to be talked about. Mm-hmm. And I've heard people say you can't hold people over hell. Yes, you can. Jesus did. Talked about it twice as much. I mean, that whole Luke 16 thing. That story freaks me out, man. And so I believe, here's what, I almost died back in 2005. And God specifically taught me during that time that I don't have a lot of time to screw around. Recently had a friend, 32 years old, died of cancer. And God re-brought up a lot of those feelings where I just don't have a lot of time to screw around. And so I've got to walk out on that stage. It could be my last shot at declaring the gospel. It could be the person out there's last shot at hearing the gospel. And so I've got to communicate in a way that I know they understand. I would rather offend somebody with my words than have them leave not hearing the gospel and have them offended at me in eternity. And so I'm gonna declare it as clearly as I can. I'm gonna say what needs to be said. I don't have time for political correctness and all that stuff. I don't even care about it. I don't care who likes me. I don't care who hates me. I just want people to know who Jesus is.